Welcome to the National Road Heritage Corridor's Heritage Stewards Academy. I'm Jen Burden, Director of Cultural Resources for the National Road. In this episode, Wendy Burtner of nonprofit Sidekick advises us on fundraising basics.
Hi, I'm Wendy Burtner, founder of Nonprofit Sidekick, a coaching, consulting, and training firm based in Pittsburgh. Today, I'm going to talk to you about fundraising. Fundraising mostly for small organizations, and this is kind of a fundraising 101. So we're going to cover some basics and then go into a little further away from basics, shall we say. So first we'll talk about the different types of incomes for nonprofits. How do nonprofits bring money in the door? Is it donated? Is it earned? And we'll talk about a little bit about the income mix and then how to get started. What's a basic kind of process for fundraising? So let's first talk about contributed income. This is money people are giving you without really getting anything in return. So you might get a grant from a private foundation or a corporate foundation. That is considered contributed income. You might get from a corporation, you might get marketing money. So that might be a sponsorship. That is not a grant, right? But it's still considered contributed income. You might get a grant or a contract from the government. They're asking you to do work with people in your or companies in your region, or individuals. Individual donors give money to organizations as well. So there's kind of four buckets of contributed income that we talk about: foundations, corporations, government, and individuals. So foundation grants, I think everybody kind of has a good sense. You have to write a proposal. The foundation has, buckets of money that they give away every year. And you have to meet with the foundation. You have to meet their priorities. So you don't want to write grants to just any foundation out there in the world. You want to make sure that you can research them. You can look online. You can see what they fund. If they are in your mission area, if they fund other organizations like your organization, then you might want to put in a phone call to them and see if they would be interested in funding you as well. I always say try not to send in foundation grant proposals just cold unless they ask to. Some foundations say don't contact us, just send us a proposal. Okay, do that. But if not, you want to talk to them and you want to give them a sense of what you're doing and why they should be supporting you. Corporations have a couple of different ways that they give to nonprofits. One is they might have a foundation that would operate very similar to the foundations I was just talking about, where you write a proposal. Same idea. You have to be in their priority area. They have to kind of have a good handle of what you're doing, and it has to be a match there. You might also get a sponsorship from a corporation, and this money may come from a corporate foundation, or it may come from their marketing department or some other department. When you're talking about a sponsorship, the corporation is going to want something in return, most likely, and that would be their logo on something, tickets to an event, whatever it might be. There's a little bit of a give and take, but most of the time the sponsorship dollar amount is higher than the value of whatever they're getting in return. And that is why we put it in the contributed income category for this presentation. Corporations also have matching programs. So when an employee gives money to a nonprofit, they can request that the corporation match that money. A lot of nonprofits will just put a little blurb on their newsletter or something like, hey, does your employer have a matching gifts program? You can, if you have donors that are already giving you money, you can double that money by doing it that way. Corporations also may have volunteer programs where they have groups or teams or departments that go out and do projects. There's lots of different ways that corporations encourage their employees to get involved with nonprofits in their community. And I think for nonprofits, we just have to figure out how can we get on their radar. So the third area of contributed income is the government. You can get government grants or you can get government contracts. Contracts are for direct services. They're saying you are going to do this service. The government wants to provide this particular service, so you are going to contract with the government to do that service. Grants are often, hey, we have an idea, we want to fund some new idea, and so they put out an RFP or request for proposal for whatever that department or that agency. If it's economic development, they might say, hey, we want to fund downtown projects in small towns, right? So we're going to give $25,000. So if you live in a small town and your organization is all about that, you might be a candidate for that grant. Couple of things to know about the difference between a foundation grant and a government grant. Government grants may be reimbursable grants, meaning you have to spend that money first and then you apply to them and they send you the money. Government grants are going to have reporting requirements that sometimes are much more in depth. So you want to know that in advance. You want to know that in advance for a foundation too, but often government agencies just have a higher level and it's data that you need to keep from day one. So if you don't know, if you haven't asked the question or haven't paid attention, and then you get to the end of the grant and they're saying, where's this data point? You might not have it, right? So you want to make sure that you have all of that information and you have a true understanding of the full picture of that grant, not just how much money you might get in, but what reporting requirements will you have and when. Individuals is the fourth bucket of income in our contributed income or fundraising category. And again, like corporations, there are just so many ways that individuals can contribute. They can straight up donate to you. They might give you items. They might donate a desk. They might donate something that you use, or they might donate things that you either sell or invest in, such as art or property, right? Individuals, there are lots of different ways. Individuals volunteer as well, right? That's the corporations or the individuals. Lots of different ways that nonprofits benefit from having relationships with individuals. Lots of different ways they might give. There are a couple of areas of individual giving that are a little farther removed, that you do not have the capability of building that relationship with them or bringing them in. And that might be the roundup at a store in retail, or buy our product and we'll give 25%, the cause marketing things. Those are other ways that individuals make those decisions to purchase this item because it's going to benefit something they care about, but they're not directly interacting with your organization. So 4 buckets: foundations, corporations, government, and individuals, 4 different ways, 4 different kind of skill sets to raise money from them as well. So we'll kind of get into each of those as we go along a little bit. They will come up a few times over. But I did want to pull out something that is slightly controversial that kind of hits on each of those buckets, and that is events. Small organizations, new organizations ask all the time, should we do events? And events can be a really good way to build up your community, your family, whatever you're calling it, to get more people interested in your organization. They can also be huge fundraisers if they are well done. But oftentimes, huge fundraisers only happen, that big dollar amount only happens when you have good corporate sponsors, right? Many fundraisers don't like events. They are a lot of work. They say that the return on investment is very low. So you need to figure out if that's right for your organization and what kind of event you're going to have. Do you have the capacity for people to be out there really getting the corporate sponsorships? And I'm not talking about the $25 sponsorships. I'm talking about the $2,500, or higher sponsorships. And you need to have the capacity to do that kind of thing for that really big fundraising event. Now, smaller nonprofits might do restaurant nights or bake sales or car washes still and raise a decent amount of money for that organization. I think what I want to say about events is make sure you're right sizing it for your organization, that it fits with your capacity to actually hold and pull off the event, and that it's going to bring in enough money that return on investment is actually there. So events, I love them. I think they're great for building community, for new organizations, for getting people to know what you are, what you're doing. Having some kind of events can be really great, but you really have to be critical about them and make sure that over time that they are actually not bleeding you dry of money, that they're not costing you money. So when you're thinking about fundraising strategy and you're thinking about how are we going to fundraise, there's some things that you really want to keep in mind. You want to have really clear goals. And I know if you're young and early on, that can be very hard to do, to say, well, we need to raise X amount of dollars. You're just kind of going, we're going to raise as much as we can. And I get that. But over time, you really want to focus in and have some clear goals. So having clear goals means you can get everybody on the same page, right? And if you're young or you're small and you have a lot of people working on this, everybody has to be on the same page. You have to know, who are you targeting? Are you going to go after corporations? Are you going to try for foundation grants, government grants, individuals? Who's your target audience? Maybe you're going to do a mix. That's great. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But make sure you know and you kind of have that broken down. Now, this third point can be tough, can be hard, but you want to really think about a compelling story or a case statement. Why should I give my money to you? If you come to me and you say, hey, I think you'd be interested in this, will you give me $5? Okay, I might part with $5 without thinking too much. But if you're coming to me and asking me for a significant amount of money, or for me to spend a significant amount of money to go to your event, like $150, $200 on a ticket, I need to know, what am I supporting? So you need to have a really compelling story and a case statement. And again, everybody needs to be on the same page and understand, what does that mean? Before you start fundraising, you need to think about your stewardship. Stewardship is taking care of that donor, taking care of their money, and taking care of the organization after they've given. So you need to have in place, how are we going to communicate with our donors? Even the smallest donor needs to, at the very least, have a thank you, not just the receipt that they get out of the online thing, but a thank you, a genuine thank you. What else are you going to do? Are you going to invite them to your events? How are you going to communicate that the organization is doing really well? Do you have an email list that they go on? Do you mail out newsletters? Thinking about, how do you do donor stewardship? This is so important for the next gift and the next gift after that, and for that donor to bring other people in. If I give you $100 and I don't hear from you, I get the thank you, but I don't ever hear from you again, I might not even think to give you money next time around, right? So you want to stay an appropriate amount of in my face, right? But that's stewardship. You need to have that communication. You need to show that you're taking care of the money that they gave you. So that requires an infrastructure. And I'm not saying you have to go out and spend a ton of money on a database if that's not where you are. You could have a spreadsheet that you're just tracking them. It's not too expensive to get some email, like different apps that will put all of your emails in there, and you can send them out en masse. Make sure you're doing something along those lines as you start your fundraising journey. You have to have some kind of infrastructure in place to acknowledge them and then keep them coming back. The next bullet is culture of philanthropy. And this is really that people understand the difference between a for-profit and a nonprofit for this area. And that is, people give for entirely different reasons than they purchase items. Purchasing items is a transaction. And I'm saying, is it worth it? If I'm buying a coffee cup and it's, $300, I'm going to make that decision. Is this cup worth $300? And I'll tell you, I'm probably going to say no and put it back on the shelf. That's how I do that. Now, if I'm donating to an organization and I feel that that is a compelling mission and what they're doing has very high impact, and I'm saying this is something I want to get behind, I will give $300, right? So the difference between sales and fundraising is this culture of philanthropy, and it's everybody needs to understand that and understand that we have to do fundraising all the time in order to stay alive. That is part of it. It's not, making more money on this other side. Part of running a nonprofit is this culture of philanthropy and understanding how that works. In the nonprofit, I guess you call it the business plan or the business model. So that's all giving. Those are donations, those are grants. That's kind of the giving, right? I want to spend a few minutes now on earned revenue. Earned revenue, according to the IRS and your accountant, is going to be the money that you receive for selling products, for charging fees for services, training, classes. Maybe it's ticket sales for events. Maybe it's, like I said, the merchandise sales. Maybe you do classes that you charge for. Anything along those lines is going to be what they call earned revenue. And that is where the IRS wants you to keep track of that separately. So your accountant or bookkeeper should understand that. And they want to know, because if you're getting earned revenue that is not directly related to your mission, then it's going to be taxed, right? It's called unrelated business income, and that'll be taxed as if you were a business. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's a bad thing. You have to make that decision based on what you do, your organization and how you're running it. I have heard about organizations that have Dunkin' Donut franchises, that they own the franchise. So any profit that store has comes to the organization. That organization pays taxes on that money because it is earned revenue. So that's what you want to consider. If you are charging money for something, is it part of your mission? If not, you're going to have to pay taxes, and you're going to have to take that into consideration. You want to take into consideration diversification. So when you are getting different types of money in the door, it's safer for you, right? Financially, that's a better plan. I once ran an organization, and we had one donor, one foundation was about half of our budget. Well, when that foundation said, we're done giving you money, that was a major problem for us. That was a crisis. So diversifying your income is very important. Having some sort of diversification will help you have sustainable revenue models. So making sure that no matter what happens, if this revenue line goes away, we still have these, right? This leads to sustainability. It leads to financial resilience. If you get the same money from the same people every year, that's great. But know that people change their minds. People switch their priority areas. They might be giving in this category now, and next year they're just not. So making sure that you have a good mix. And something important around earned revenue is there are limitations on the amount of unrelated business income a nonprofit can receive without jeopardizing your tax-exempt status. So if that Dunkin' Donut franchise ends up being a major percentage of their income, the IRS might say, you're not tax-exempt anymore. So as that income grows, your other income, your donations, your grants, your government grants, all of that has to grow at the same rate. So a lot of times I get asked, what's the right mix? What should we be thinking about in terms of mix? I raise this flag all the time because of my own personal experience, but there are a lot of stories out there. A lot of nonprofits do experience this, where suddenly their major donor, even in for-profits, this happens. A major contract can go away, right? It's the same thing. You need to be thinking about that in advance. So I'm not going to give you a mix because every organization is different. So you have to assess your current situation. Where are your strengths and weaknesses in terms of fundraising and financial management? Are you relying too much on one particular gift or a group of gifts? Really take the time to look at that and say, what are we doing here? Then what are our strengths and weaknesses as an organization? Do we have really strong fundraising already? Do we have people that are really good at it that we know that we just amp them up and out they go? So you want to research your market and your donors. Understand your target audience's preferences. Monitor those fundraising trends. If you're the type of organization that you don't have very many individual donors, you don't have the people on staff that are good at doing that individual fundraising, you can't say, hey, next year we're going to put $10,000 in the budget for individual fundraising. First, you have to go back and figure out how you get the capacity to do that, right? You want to have a good plan in place. I say this all the time, and that is that having a plan in place allows you to be flexible. So people will say to me, I don't want a plan because I have to remain flexible. If I have a plan, then suddenly, it's black and white. That is not the point of having a plan. If you don't have a plan, you have chaos, and all the people around you are going to be confused. They're not going to be able to follow you. They're not going to be able to help you raise more money. Having a plan in place that says we're going to do it this way, this from individuals, we're going to try to get this much in grants, et cetera, et cetera. If you're unsuccessful 3 months in, 6 months in, you can always pivot. You can change. You can decide you're going to do things a little bit different. but you have to know what you can do going into it, right, to put together that plan. Now, as I said, without a plan, chaos. With a plan, you actually can be flexible, and that's the mindset you have to have going into this. When you think about the right mix, you want to think about your organization's unique characteristics, the composition of your board, your staff, your mission. When people, I was the COO of a bereavement camp for a while. Let me tell you, people would give money to that. And I'm not being, caustic about this or sarcastic or anything. Like, that's a mission that people, oh my gosh, kids who have lost a parent or a sibling, that's going to pull on anybody's heartstrings. Some of the other organizations that I worked in that were like economic development, we didn't have a lot of individual donors. So think of your mission, the nature of your work, what really is going to work for you. If you're in economic development, it's just not going to be the individuals, right? That's going to be a tough sell. So make sure you get the mix that not only is a good mix, but it works for your organization. You do not want to spread yourself too thin. It is way more effective to implement just a few fundraising programs that you have the skills and the capacity to do and build up. You just don't want to do the shotgun. I always talk about, like, shotgun is, we're just going to try everything. We're going to put everything out there. We're going to try a little bit of it. And that takes a lot of work. And there's not a lot of return on investment, to be very honest with you. So really think about, what do you do well? What suits your mission? What suits your organization right now? What makes sense in terms of your capacity? Do those things, right? So I recently worked with I just want to give you a couple examples. I recently worked with a community center. They were a little of everything, a community center. I think they had a daycare and a food pantry, and they had job training programs, right? So they were in the heart of a community and were really there to support the community. They lost some funding, and they started to think of creative ways that they could do a different income mix. And they started to think about earned revenue. And they looked around, they said, our community doesn't really have a coffee shop and it doesn't really have a laundromat. Does that make sense for us to make the investment to start those two businesses? So they're actually in the process of considering that right now. How are we going to go about doing this? Do we have the resources, the capital to get that started? I mean, obviously, those would be good businesses in that neighborhood. There's none around, right? But they need to kind of go a little bit further with that. So now we've got the consideration for the plan. We've got the considerations for the income mix. Let's talk about a basic process, right? Some of you might be like, but I don't know how to fundraise. So let's talk about that. And this is, again, like, not going to go straight to the ask. There's a lot of things that happen before you get to the ask, and there are a lot of things that happen after the ask. The ask is the middle of this process. So we're going to start with planning. We talked a little bit about that, right? So for planning, you want to look back. What have you done really well? What held you back? What would or could you do differently looking at the past years that you've done fundraising? You want to look forward. What are you trying to accomplish? What are your goals and strategies? How are you trying to grow? You want to align then your fundraising goals with your organizational goals. If you want to launch this big new program within the next few years, that's really a focus for your fundraising campaigns coming up. Make sure those two things are aligned. And then the next piece you want to do is assign, because if you just have plans and they're not assigned to anybody, it does not get done. So as you roll out this plan that we're going to, let's say you're going to try to get a foundation grant or a couple foundation grants to start this new program, right? Who is going to do that work? Make sure you have a name or two next to it, and make sure you have a timeline or a schedule that says this is what we're doing. Now, if you are doing multiple types of fundraising, this schedule is so important, because you don't want to have a focus on grants that are all the proposals are due at the end of March, and you're also doing a gala in March, right? That's going to be just crazy town for everybody. So check your schedule, make sure everything looks good. So you have a really good plan in place. Then you want to prepare for the ask. No matter what kind of ask you're doing, you want to have a really strong case for support, right? This is, why should I give to you? We talked about this a little more. The statement of need. What is the need for your programs? Is it really needed in your community? You probably know why it's needed. Put that down. How do you plan to make a difference? If there's a need, what are you doing to make it better, to change the world, to make it a better place? How are you measuring success? How do you know when you've been successful? These are important things that donors and funders want to know ahead of time, right? So statement of need. Are you needed in your area? Why? Impact statement. How are you going to address that need? What kind of impact are you going to make? And then outcome. How are you going to measure the success? Those are the three things you start with your case of support. Then you want to put together a prospect list. Who are you going to ask? Are you going to ask individuals? Are you going to ask foundations? You go back to the 4 buckets. And then within those buckets, you start doing your research. Who matches up to your needs? Who's funding what you need funding for, right? That's the donor research. So for individuals, this can be a little more difficult than with foundations. Foundations, pretty much every foundation has a website now. They're very clear what they will and won't fund. Some of them have online applications that cut you off if you are not eligible for their funding. They say thank you, but you're not eligible for our funding. So individual donor research can be trickier. Corporate donor research can be a little trickier, but you really want to get in there and try to figure out, are they somebody or a company that may support our services, what we do. Now, as you go into this, some people are going to want to hear just the pull on the heartstrings that we talked about. They're just going to want to hear about your case for support. But there are going to be a lot of people that are looking for financial data. Where does your money come from? How do you spend your money? How many people are you serving? What does it cost per person? They're going to ask you questions that you're not going to have it all readily available, but try to have as much as possible so you can just kind of rattle it off that we serve 100 people per year, or whatever those numbers are. It just helps to bolster your case for support. And then you want to rehearse the ask. I know when I started out, I would sit there before I'd pick up the phone and call that program officer at a foundation and say, hey, you should fund us, right? You want to make sure that you feel really comfortable saying the words. Because I will tell you, especially with foundations, when you call them up and you start talking to them, one of the first questions they're going to ask you is how much? And that was the question, for whatever reason, that I struggled with the most. Even if I had 25,000 written in front of me on the table, I still kind of struggled, and I had to rehearse. And after a while, it was like, yeah, 25,000. The program did, and I was able to kind of come up with my own way of saying that without saying, I need $25,000, right? That was tough for me. I will admit it. But once I got in there and rehearsed it, had a great case for support, it got easier and easier every time. So that's your prepare. That's your second step in the fundraising process. The third is when we ask, right? So for foundations, you might phone call to the program officer and then be invited to write a grant. You might start with a grant. So those writing skills are going to be key with foundations. But there's a lot of interpersonal relationship building as well. You might ask on social media for individuals to support your group. This positive drumbeat of good news with an occasional ask is the key to good fundraising. You don't want to ask with every single post that you're doing on social media, right? You want to talk to them and tell them how great you are. And then, oh, hey, by the way, will you support us, right? That's the way to ask on social media. When you have events, you want to make sure that there's the right mix of fun and the ask. Oftentimes events are fun. They might be concerts, they might be galas, they might be, family day in the park. So you want to make sure people are having fun, and you don't want to miss the opportunity for the ask, but it has to be the right balance, right? And corporations, as I said earlier, but again, I'm going to underscore this, they really want to hear how it will benefit them. Occasionally, you will have a corporation that's like, we don't want to put our name on anything. But most of the time, they want to know how you're going to promote them and how it will somehow benefit them. Now, if you get in and they're saying, no, we don't want to hear that, scrap that whole pitch and go back to your mission and your case for support. But be ready for it with any corporation. And it's really just inviting them. It's not necessarily asking them to give you money. You are inviting them to be part of your community, part of your family, part of your team, whatever you are comfortable saying. You're saying, hey, will you help us do this thing? Right? Some foundation or some fundraisers have a saying that say, if you ask people for money, they will give you advice. If you ask them for advice, they will give you money. And while it's not always 100% that way, it's a good thing to think about. You don't just want to walk in a room and ask somebody, whether it's a foundation, corporation, or individual, hey, give me money. You want to make sure that they're involved and they want to be part of the mission. They understand that this is what you're doing, and making them part of the team. Asking them for a little advice never hurts. After the ask, we're going to assume you got the money. And the next point in the process is to thank them. Genuinely thank them. Now, you want to acknowledge it with a receipt and a letter that's very formal, that has all of the phrases in there that you have to have based on the IRS, right? That's great, but please don't let that be the only communication you have with them. I like to ask board members to make thank you calls. These days, nobody answers their phone if it's a number they don't recognize, and so it ends up being a message. But it's still impressive. It's still, when a board member calls, even for a $100 donation, hey, I'm Susie, I'm from the board, I feel really special that they took the time to thank me for my little $100 donation. It feels good, and I'm probably going to come back and give to you again. Handwritten note, same response. If you can do both, that's great. You don't have to do both, but either one or both of those is fantastic. If you are going to thank them publicly, such as on social media or a website, and this would typically be the corporation, foundation, maybe a very large individual donor, you want to make sure they're okay with that, first of all, that they are fine, that if you're using their logo, you always have to ask permission for that. If you're putting it on the website or putting it out on social media, either one, you want to make sure they're on board with you acknowledging them. And however you're going to acknowledge them is also very important, that they understand that. After they give their gift, most fundraising professionals will tell you that maybe 3 to 6 months, you want to have a follow-up coffee with them, and you want to tell them how great everything is going at the organization, give them an update, show them pictures, whatever you can do to kind of show them, hey, your money's going far. We are using it to do these wonderful things. And that really sets you up for the next gift or the next ask. Some foundation people want to come visit. Great. If you can, instead of having a coffee, if you can have them come and do a site visit, even individuals, major donors, you might ask them to come, hey, would you like to come see what your money, what your investment is producing, is doing? That's a really good thing. People ask, should I give them a gift? Should I give them a thank you gift? And we see it on public media, right? Become a member, get a coffee mug or whatever. Just make sure you know the rules for that. There are dollar limits, and there are appropriate amounts that you need to keep in consideration for gifts. So if you're going to give a gift, if you're going to give a mug with, filled with chocolates, I had a boss that did that all the time. People love it. That's not such a big deal. But if you're going to give them anything of value, and I cannot remember the number and it changes. So you need to make sure you're checking with the IRS and maybe even your state of what amount can you give? What kind of gifts can you give as thank you gifts? Okay, so you've thanked them, genuinely thanked them, and thanked them a couple different times. The next phase is stewardship. The definition of stewardship is supervising or taking care of something. So a couple ways that we want to show them that we're being good stewards. One is taking care of their money. You want to show them that you are fiscally responsible. So if you have an annual report, you want to make sure that your donors get a copy of that. You want to find ways to show them that you are being fiscally responsible. The second thing that you want to take good care of is the organization and the mission. So you want to show them that you're doing what you said you were going to do. If you got that donation because you said we're going to expand and do this new program, you want to show them we've done this program and here's the impact of the program. Not just here we did it, but you want to say we've done it and we are now, here's some really good things that have happened in our community because of your donation. It might not be just their donation also. Remember that even a $100 donor wants to hear these things because they know that their donation is taken in total with the other donations. So you're going to take good care of their money. You're going to be fiscally responsible. You're going to take good care of the organization and serve your mission with their money, but you also want to take good care of them. So we've thanked them. We talked about that last time. Acknowledge them if it's appropriate, but continuing to communicate with them. So this is where it's very important to have some sort of infrastructure in place so that you can do donor-specific communication. And maybe you're doing donors above a certain amount. Maybe you're doing foundations only. But you want to be communicating with them, not every day, not every week, maybe not even every month, but regularly. You want to give them that constant drumbeat of good news that they can see you're doing lots of good things with the organization, because they are most likely seeing themselves as an investor, as part of your organization now. And that's what you want, because that means they'll come back again. You want to take really good care of the data. This is becoming more and more of what do you want to call it? A red flag in the nonprofit sector. Hackers are starting to realize that not starting, this has been for a while, but it seems to be kicking up more recently. Hackers are realizing that nonprofit databases are full of information about wealthy individuals and foundations and corporations. And so you want to make sure you're protecting that data. So if you have this in a spreadsheet, you are not using a commercial database that's made for this. You want to make sure that spreadsheet isn't just hanging out on Google, that it's somewhere safe, it's protected. You want them to know as well that you are protecting their data. So that is the 5-step process of fundraising. A few tips and observations for you as you start into the fundraising fun of fundraising. For individuals, giving can be very emotional and less logical. So make sure you have lots of stories, lots of images, lots of colors. A little bit of data is always good, but make sure it's related to something very human. You don't just want to put out a chart of data and expect a lot of people to start giving you money. They're going to give you money because that data is supported by stories and pictures and, all of these wonderful things of how you're being successful. For institutions, they're going to be a higher level of logical, a higher level of data. In fact, a lot of the institutions, as we talked about, are going to be requiring specific data. So it's important for you to know that there's going to be a little bit of emotional, because they're still people, but a little bit of the data. I always say, as you're meeting a new foundation or corporation, if you have a place that they can come to see your work in action, to do a site visit, that's the emotional side. While they're there, they'll ask you all kinds of data questions, but that's how you can cover both of them. Commitment is important. Most donors want to see that you are committed to the mission, you are committed to your plan for your programs, you're committed to that impact. And they want to see that the person asking them for money is committed to the organization. So you don't want just anybody out there asking for money. The people that are asking for money should be committed. They should understand. They should know the mission and the programs and the outcome, the impact. All of those things are very important. If somebody comes to me and asks me to donate to an organization and they don't know some of the basic things, I'm wondering, well, what's going on here? It doesn't feel like a safe bet for my money, right? They want authentic gratitude and diligent stewardship, right? Authentically thank them. That, again, that receipt letter, the email that they receive is great. They need it. We all need to do that. But finding a way to connect and be authentic and say to them, we really appreciate your gift and really mean it is important. And then showing them that you are really taking care of the money, the organization, them as donors, the data, all of those things. You have all those things in place. That's going to be important for that, again, for the second gift. Basically do what you say you're going to do, right? If you tell them that you're going to do one thing and you don't do that, that might work once. That might work once for you to come back and say, I know we said that we were going to spend your money on this new program, but we couldn't do it. And you better have a good reason for why you didn't do it. But if you come back a second time, they're not coming back a third time. There's, in some cases, for government grants and foundation grants, they can actually give you money and restrict it, meaning you can only spend your money on whatever you wrote your grant proposal for. Your accountant needs to know that. You need to know that. That is legally, that is very important. So do what you say you're going to do. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Make sure you have a schedule. Make sure you have a way. And is it via email? Is it phone calls? Are they meetings? Depending on the donor or the giver, how are you doing this? But you want to make sure that you are keeping them in the loop, that they know what's happening with the organization. And again, like I said earlier, the constant drumbeat of good news is really important. You can't keep going to donors with negativity and saying, please help us out of this hole again. You can do that maybe once a year. But other than that, they want to see that their investment is really making good things happen in their community, that they're not saving your organization every 6 months. So I'm going to end this on fundraising is very intimidating if you haven't done it before. People feel like, oh my gosh, I can never ask anybody for money. But I just want you to sit for a little bit and think about, imagine if you were the funder or the donor, what would you want to know and how would you want to be treated? How would you want to be asked for money? Make sure that you're working that into your ask, the way that you become a fundraiser. Not every fundraiser is a cookie cutter of the other, right? We have to be ourselves. The authenticity, being genuine is a really important part of fundraising. You just can't beat it. So take a moment, think about, okay, how would I respond if I was in this person's shoes? And then create the communication that you want to have with that potential donor or funder around that. So thank you so much. We talked today about the fundraising site or the process of fundraising, who you might get money from. This was very much a fundraising 101 for you, just to give you some basics to get you started. And there's lots of other resources out there for you as you grow in your fundraising capacity. But thank you for spending some time with me today.